Gary Gensler talks on the status of Bitcoin ETF approvals. NYAG files a complaint against Genesis leadership for covering up a $1 billion hole in their crypto lending firm. Grayscale moves one step closer to an ETF with their S3 filing. Stablecoin protocol added to the Bitcoin network. Financial investigators' analysis reveals where billions of dollars in customer funds were spent by SBF and FTX. A U.S. recession is looming, but is the crypto winter almost over? Hey everybody, welcome back to Crypto Daily. So as you can tell, we got a lot of news today. That was a lot to ramble off, but Bitcoin has been trading all over the place, bouncing in this $28,000 range. So we saw it kind of bouncing at the low end of 28K last night. Actually, for a second, I thought we were going to break it. I think we were at like 28,150 or something. I put in some orders to buy at 28,200, I think, and they got filled. So that was nice to see. Altcoins are not performing that well. As you can see, Ethereum's down 0.5%. XRP's down 1%. Bunch of other altcoins are down, and just generally Bitcoin dominance is up. So that's been interesting to keep an eye on in terms of Bitcoin dominance. So the SEC chairman, Gary Gensler, our favorite person in the world, he just said that they are reviewing all the applications for spot ETFs. I think he mentioned that they're reviewing like between 6 and 8 of them right now, which is pretty much all of them. So when kind of pressed to the the question that all of us are asking, will one ETF get approved before the other ones? Gary said he wouldn't answer that. So we didn't really get any news on that, but I think most of us are speculating that they're all going to get approved at the same time, especially considering that they keep, and you'll see in this later in this episode with BlackRock, they all keep amending their applications in very much the same way. So we'll see what happens with that. But ultimately, I think the ETFs are all going to get approved at the same time, my personal opinion. So DCG, Gemini, Genesis, they're all kind of interrelated. And Michael Morrow and Barry Silbert just got slapped with a notice from the NYAG. It claimed that they disguised $1.1 billion in losses through a months-long campaign of misstatements, omissions, and concealment. So the NYAG stated that Genesis CFO told employees not to disclose the promissory note to Gemini, and that the company concealed and suppressed information that would have revealed the note or the losses. So basically, they're just talking about how they kind of covered this up post FTX, Three Arrows Capital, all kind of collapsing, and obviously their main loss was with 3AC. So this complaint not looking good for them. Definitely not something that you want to see. But at the same time, they did cover up a lot of these losses and tried to prevent the public from seeing them, which is understandable from their position. But obviously, as a company that's trading in securities, that's not good. So we'll see what develops from this. Obviously, right now it's a complaint. Maybe it'll turn into more. Grayscale is a subsidiary of DCG, which got that complaint. But Grayscale is still a separate entity from Genesis, and they just filed an S3. So I'll just read this off because it'll shed some light on what that means. Typically, issuers file a registration statement on Form S1 for their initial public offering of equity securities registered under the Securities Act. GBTC, however, is eligible to use the Form S3, a shorter filing that incorporates by reference its SEC disclosures and reports because its shares have been registered under the Securities Exchange Act of 1934 since January 2020, and it meets other requirements of the form. So basically, because Grayscale has been a trust and a registered company, public trading company with the SEC, they don't have to fill out all the same forms and go through the same process as other companies that are trying to release, for example, a Bitcoin ETF. Because they obviously already meet a lot of the requirements that they've had to meet over the last couple of years. So this is good to see for Grayscale. This is like another step forward for them in the process of getting toward an ETF. They said, importantly, GBTC is ready to operate as an ETF upon receipt of these regulatory approvals. And on behalf of GBTC's investors, Grayscale looks forward to working collaboratively and expeditiously with the SEC on these matters. So I guess we'll see. I think all the ETFs are going to get approved at the same time, like I said earlier in the episode. But Obviously Grayscale is a little further along than all the others. So we'll see what happens with that. Talking about ETFs, BlackRock just filed an updated prospectus for their ETF. So this is what ARK, Fidelity, and others did as well, which is, like I said, a lot of these companies are kind of following the same framework. Their ETF applications all kind of look the same. So we'll see what kind of happens with that. But in my opinion, they're all going to get approved at the same time. Taproot assets on mainnet, a new era for Bitcoin and beyond. So this article talks about Lightning Engineering and essentially how they're bringing stablecoins to the Bitcoin blockchain. So bringing stablecoins to Bitcoin, obviously a great thing. Stablecoins continue to take more and more market share in the crypto space. We talked yesterday about how stablecoins are the 16th largest holder of US treasuries. So that's pretty crazy, and it's only continuing to grow. FTX used billions of dollars in customer funds to pay back Binance. So obviously we've been following the whole FTX SBF trial. It just came out, and I talked about yesterday how there was going to be a financial investigator on the stand today. He talked about how $2.1 billion was paid back to Binance right before the collapse of FTX. So pretty wild to see, just in terms of where this money was flowing. And when asked about did SBF and FTX use customer funds, he said unequivocally yes. Used it for all sorts of random things, from $96 million in real estate properties to $2 billion going to Binance. So Nifty, our friend, he posted on Twitter talking about SocialFi, and is this the real SocialFi? Because there's not much social happening on it, which is true. I mean, you look at these platforms, and a lot of them are more so about selling tickets than about actual SocialFi. So to me, SocialFi is the convergence of social and finance, and I think we'll see more and more projects kind of come up that are dealing with that. In my opinion, there's a lot of projects that have more potential. I won't talk about them because that would get too shilly, but SocialFi is an extremely interesting prospect to me, and obviously I think it has a lot of potential. But all these new platforms that keep popping up all over the place, I think you have to be mindful of the narrative behind them and the team behind them and what they're actually trying to achieve. Most of them are going to end up rugging, kind of like Stars Arena. So be mindful of that. And while you're being mindful of that, be mindful of a recession, because this Bloomberg analysis was actually really interesting. Right before recession, there were basically a huge number of articles that talk about a soft landing or mention soft landing. So if you look at 2000, obviously, the big crash in 2000, then you look at 2008, and then you look at 2020, and now we're kind of at peak. 2023 is even bigger than all those other ones in terms of people talking about a soft landing, and people have been talking about it for a really long time. So basically since 2021, we've been talking about a soft landing. So if this analysis is right, if we kind of take history and use it as a lens for the future, we could be right on the, cliff's edge of a recession right now. And we won't really know until it obviously happens. But I think most people pretty much accept that we're in a recession and that it's only going to get worse from here. So we'll see what happens. Obviously, the government, interest rates are super high. The government's doing a lot of weird stuff right now. You've got, wars happening in other parts of the world. So, will all of this kind of lead to ultimately a deep recession? I think so. I think a lot of other people agree with that. 30-year fixed mortgage rates rise to 8% for the first time in 23 years. So if you're buying a house, it's not a good time to get a mortgage. I know personally a couple of people who have bought a house recently, and they're getting killed on mortgage rates. And you compare that to people back in like 2020 and before that were getting these mortgages at super low interest rates. So not great in terms of buying a house. That being said, the housing market, and I know a lot of people in real estate, the housing market is still booming. And if you make an offer on a property, at least in certain areas like, around me, you make an offer on a property and people are still paying over listing price for those properties. So while this being said that mortgage rates are basically at their peak, people are still buying, and they're buying in a crazy way. So, there's still a housing shortage. People are still trying to buy houses. So there's way more demand than there is supply for houses. And we haven't seen that correct yet. But I think, real estate is a very slow moving industry. So this mortgage rate increase and the constant increase we've been on recently, I think is going to start to have more of an effect. We're seeing it in commercial real estate already, and it's just a matter of time until it hits residential. So a lot of people are getting hurt by these mortgage rates, and I guess we'll kind of see how it plays out. Total U.S. debt is now at $33.649 trillion. It increased $58 billion in a day, $604 billion in a month. It's up $20 billion every day, and up $833 million every hour. At this rate, U.S. debt will be $41 trillion in 1 year. Zero Hedge has been posting constant tweets talking about the U.S. debt and how it just keeps climbing. Obviously, we had this like huge spike upwards, and we've been on this trend to just keep increasing and increasing. And this is, meanwhile, we're in quantitative tightening. So not looking good for U.S. debt right now. And, we'll have to see how this plays out. But, at some point, the levee has to break. Something has to change. And like we were talking about with, a potential deep recession looming over our heads, I think quantitative easing is around the corner. I think that, obviously when the president changes in 2024, we're going to start to see a lot of talks of before that election really starts to take off. We're going to see a lot of candidates talking about what they do about this issue. I have a feeling this is going to be the cornerstone issue for the U.S. public interest and even global interest. Obviously, the U.S. dollar is the global reserve currency. So it is a global interest to find out how this is going to get fixed. I think most of us believe that Bitcoin is some part of the solution to this. But obviously, for the global scale, they're going to want to know what the government's doing, not what Bitcoin is doing. So the crypto winter may be over, according to Morgan Stanley Wealth Management. So they were talking about how the next halving is expected in April. We obviously know it's, in March. But they said a 50% increase in price from Bitcoin's low is typically a good sign that the trough has been achieved. Strategist Denny Galindo wrote, the world's largest cryptocurrency has risen 70% year to date and 77% from last year's lows. So we saw the low, or what we hope to be the low, in November 2022, which was 16,000, obviously right after the FTX implosion. So is that the end of the, crypto winter? Was that the bottom? I think so. I think a lot of other people agree with that. I don't think we'll see below 26K. That's my personal opinion. Anything can happen, but at this point, I think it's a steady grind up from here. And then as soon as that Bitcoin ETF gets approved, or like I said, I think they'll all get approved at the same time, it's off to the moon. But anything above 30K, in my opinion, the day that news breaks, we kind of saw that with the fake news from earlier this week. So we'll see what happens. But that's all I got for today. Thanks for listening to this episode of Crypto Daily. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.